everybody for joining the event today. My name's Laurel Dismore and I'm a Research and Innovation Officer at Northumbria Healthcare. So the aim of the event is to give you an overview of research, development and innovation that takes place within the Trust and introduce you to the services offered. So here's our speakers, and the presenters delivering the case studies today are researchers and innovators that have worked with the team, some of which have been supported by the Academic Health Science Network. So first presenting, I'm delighted to introduce our Chief Executive, Jim Mackey.
Thanks, Laurel. It's a pleasure to do this. It's really strange, isn't it, doing these things digitally, and we're all getting used to it. I suppose if you were doing this a year ago, would have all been in the Gosforth Park or somewhere like that with loads of people. And it's I think it's an innovation in its own right that we're actually finding ways to still maintain this level of engagement and focus whilst we can't actually do it in kind of physical real life anymore. So well done for that. I just wanted to say a few words which sound really obvious really when you think about it, about innovation and agility, and the value of research is even more prominent now in the NHS than ever. An awful lot of the focus will go on the really high profile, big international studies into the vaccine, the various treatments, all those sorts of things. And frankly, the fact that treatments were trialled in the spring and are being used effectively now for COVID shows how far the service has moved in the last few months, and also how reliant we are on fantastic research in the UK and internationally as well to help drive these things. But often innovation that really means that things to patients and staff can be quite simple ideas as well. And so I'd encourage colleagues this afternoon to think big and small, but just think about value and impact in whatever you're doing. You're going to see some great things, some really interesting stuff this afternoon. So hopefully you'll have a good time, you'll get something out of it, and remember, these things are only valuable if you actually do something as a result in your work when you go back to work tomorrow or later on today. So that's all I want to say really, Laurel. All the best, enjoy yourselves, and thanks for all that you're doing.
Thank you. That's great, and that brings us on to our next presentations by David Ripley and Peter Heslop. So David's the Director of Research and Development and Peter is the Head of Research and Development.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm David Ripley. I'm a cardiologist and Director for R&D. And following on from the national picture given by Jim, I'm going to give you a little bit of update about where we sit for research and development in Northumbria Healthcare, and give you a little flavour about how you may be able to get involved. I'm first going to explain why research interests me, and being a cardiologist, it won't surprise you that I'm going to show you some slides on cardiovascular disease, but the similar figures amongst all specialties. If you came into hospital with a heart attack in the 60s, there was approximately 60% in-hospital mortality rate. But now, with current medical treatment, which is being delivered by research and improved by research, then your in-hospital mortality rate is now less than 5%. A huge improvement in cardiovascular outcomes, which has been delivered on the background of research. But there's still a huge improvement to make, and heart disease, as you know, remains the biggest cause of premature death in the north of England. And therefore, research is about putting patients first. There's very clear data showing that hospitals which have a very strong record of putting patients and recruiting patients and participants into clinical research have better clinical outcomes. And therefore, we know that now clinical research is not just a nice to do exercise in the NHS. And in fact, it's been recognised by the Quality Care Commission as an indicator, and is being highlighted in our recent outstanding CQC report. Research is written into the NHS Constitution, and that's why I think we all should be certainly research aware, and more people should be researcher active. So we're quite unique in the England that we have the National Institute for Health Research Networks, and there are a number of organisations all over England, and we sit in the North East and North Cumbria NIHR, and we're one of 14 partner organisations in this organisation. And Northumbria Healthcare is an established and highly successful research group. And to give you some numbers from our recruitment activity, on the last financial year alone, we had 85 different clinical research studies actively recruiting, but it was more than that in terms of our research output, because there was 172 in either setup, delivery or follow-up, a large number of research studies delivered during a single financial year. And these were across a broad range of clinical specialties, not just the in-hospital specialties such as medicine, surgery, obstetrics and pediatrics and so on, but also in terms of Northumbria's uniqueness, we had a large community programme of research and also a significant output in primary care. And this resulted in a large number of participants recruited to clinical trials, and from 2017-18 through to 2019-20, we had a 31% increase in participants to NIHR clinical trials, and just shy of 4,000 participants in total in the last financial year. And Northumbria is not just delivering network research which has been thought up in other organisations, but we have our own chief investigator studies. These are research projects which have been conceptualised and designed by people that work in Northumbria Healthcare Trust across a large number of different specialties. And it won't surprise you that an organisation that has high number of clinical recruits and large research studies have a large academic output. And in 2019 alone, Northumbria Healthcare contributed to 76 academic publications. These are publications that other researchers and other clinicians can learn from and improve patient care. But to give you an idea of the importance of the publications, we have a number of 4-star publications in the last 18 months. And for those that haven't been involved in research, a 4-star publication is quality that is world leading in terms of originality, significance and rigor. This is truly the most important and high quality research. And there are only a handful of medical journals in the whole world that are 4-star rated. And over the last 18 months, there were 4 4-star publications that either were led by researchers in Northumbria Healthcare or contributed by researchers in Northumbria Healthcare. This really is world-leading research which changes patients' pathways. And we have a very large nursing, midwifery and allied healthcare professional research program, which is essential to the R&D output. We have a number of nurse clinical academics, a highly successful community commercial research program, and chief investigator program from the physiotherapy team. These are just a small number of the NMAP research that's happening in our organization. I don't have time to talk you through the number of awards and finalists, and these are just some, but this is just to show that we have national and international recognition in terms of awards and finalists from healthcare workers that research in Northumbria Healthcare. And finally, you'll be pleased to know that participants that take part in research enjoy it. 97% have a good experience of taking part in their research program, and 100% agree that we protect their privacy and confidentiality during this research appointments. So what's been happening over the last 6 months during the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, we're lucky in the England, we've got the NIHR network, which I've covered, and that puts us in a very unique position worldwide to deliver research and deliver research at pace, which has been demonstrated during COVID-19 pandemic. In line with other organisations, research to most other streams was paused and put on hold, and entirely reasonable because many of these patients weren't coming into hospital, and urgent public health research was prioritised. We put the full department's resource into recruiting to COVID-19 studies with a 24/7 telephone hotline. In total, we recruited to 7 UPH studies, and the most well publicised, which you'll be familiar with, is the recovery trial. This is the largest randomised controlled trial in COVID-19, and nearly 12,000 patients from 175 NHS organisations were recruited to this study, and we were a large recruiter to this study. And that trial very clearly showed that patients on oxygen or in intensive care benefited from a strong steroid, dexamethasone, and that was very clearly showed the first treatment for COVID-19, and we were proud to be involved in that and deliver that successfully here. So finally, in Northumbria, we've got a highly successful established research and development department, or now research and innovation. We've increased recruitment to NIHR network portfolio studies, and these have resulted in a significant academic output, including 4-star research which changes patients' outcomes. We have an established nursing, midwifery and allied health program research. We have recognition in terms of awards and shortlistings and excellent patient feedback. So I just really want to reach out, and if anybody is on this call today and is interested in research, curious about research, just has any questions, come and speak to me or Peter, and we'll be able to help point you in the right direction. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you both to Jim and David for sharing their time with us and the support of this great department we have, which we think is getting better and better. One of the reasons for this event is to share with you all the changes we are making to include innovation into our portfolio and why we think it's important to do that. So what does it all mean? At the time of deciding to include innovation into our department's title, I thought I need to be very clear what that actually meant. I don't know how obvious this change is to you all, but I thought it would be a helpful introduction to this event to explain my understanding, which of course I have researched. So we need to think of research as a journey. The beginning of a research journey usually starts with a mental thought, something we typically call a new idea. Innovation is further creating and shaping that new idea into something, the invented. Research is what we do to establish facts and reach new conclusions, and finally development is introducing and improving what we already have. I know that we need to put this into some easier concept to understand, so as I appreciate it all sounds a little dry, I thought I would share the journey of something that's very familiar to you all. Steve Jobs had an idea. He wanted a phone that could do more than just allow us to speak to one another. He invented a phone that could do just that, the iPhone. It didn't stop there, as every year since 2007, Apple have researched that idea and further developed the iPhone into something that should be called something other than a phone. It's nearly independent of us humans. Throughout reading about all of Steve's ideas and his development of the iPhone, I started to wonder what the I stands for. Because this is a virtual event, we can't really have something interaction, so I'll just tell you. So Steve Jobs said it has no official meaning, but it has grown to stand for iconic, internet, individual, instruct, inform and inspire. But now beyond his demise, it's simply just a branding. So I only had 5 minutes, so I would like to thank you all, and we look forward to working with you with your ideas. I'd like to leave you with the message that your idea doesn't have to be as grand as Steve's. We want to encourage everyone and anyone in developing their innovative research ideas. I'd also like to say there isn't an idea that's too small. Often the smaller ones are the better ones, but please come and visit us anytime with your ideas, and we'll take the how do I do it away and support you to the outcome. One big dilemma we have is whether to be called IR&D or D&I. or I&D. I'm thinking IR&D. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy the rest of the event.
So thank you, David and Peter, and next is the innovation presentation. So this presentation is on innovation within healthcare and innovation at North. So innovation in the NHS is defined as an idea, service or product that is new to the NHS or applied in a way that is new, which significantly improves the quality of health and care wherever it's applied. Innovation starts with a bright idea, and it can be the development of a product, a process, or the identification of an unmet need in your service. And an innovation doesn't have to be a high-tech device or technology. It can be something simple that helps to improve quality of care or patient experience. Innovation is simply about applying new and better solutions to problems that meet new or existing requirements. That can be defined as use of something original and more effective, and as a consequence, it breaks into the market or society. So it means doing or creating something that is new in order to grow. Innovation in the NHS, it can be incremental, which means building on and improving existing practices. It might be radical, so a completely new approach to solving existing problems, or revolutionary, which means an entirely new and unexpected market. So innovations not only originate an idea, but involves the process of the successful development, implementation, and spread of that idea into widespread use. So innovation and bright ideas, they can come from any employee of Northumbria Healthcare, service users, and also companies as they might want to develop or validate a product. So it might be that you hear from myself to see if there's any interest in your clinical team to work with companies. There's many benefits of innovation, including improving patient care and experience, as well as the experiences of staff and the working environments. So innovation is important for service transformation and a more sustainable health system. Breakthroughs enable prevention of ill health, early diagnosis, more effective treatments, better outcomes and faster recovery. By implementing innovation in healthcare, it creates an additional revenue source for the organisation and efficiency savings within the system. But it's also important for the UK economy, bringing in jobs and services. And innovation is also included in the NHS long-term plan as well. And the plan sets out a strategic way to improve the quality of patient care and health outcomes. And innovation is recognised as being critically important in driving future outcomes improvements, including new treatment possibilities that a modern health service should rightly be providing. The strategy is to speed up the pipeline for development innovation in the NHS by spreading proven new techniques and technologies so that proven and affordable innovations gets to patients faster. And the plan also places great emphasis on the role of digital transformation in helping health and care professionals communicate better and enabling people to access the care they need quickly and easily. So what's the purpose of having an innovation team at Northumbria Healthcare? We're here to develop innovation within the organisation and support ideas arising from staff. So we'll do this by having structures and processes in place to encourage staff to share their ideas and problems. We'll have those ideas assessed, including whether those ideas have any commercial potential and intellectual property, and look at ways to share and spread the innovation. So intellectual property, or IP, it refers to something that you can create using your mind. So for example, a story, an invention, an artistic work or a symbol. And by having the right type of IP protection, it helps to stop people stealing or copying. So this is a copy of the innovation pathway, and apologies if it's not very clear, but this outlines the pathway to innovation success. But it doesn't mean that every idea will follow each of the steps listed. But this is because an innovation might come to the innovation team and some of the steps might have already been completed. So stages can arrive at any time during the process, and we are here to support you through these stages. We encourage a culture of innovation where you can share your ideas and feel supported throughout each step in the pathway. But just to give you a brief overview of each stage. So any employee of Northumbria can have an idea, and it's important to note that ideas should not be disclosed or discussed with anyone until advice has been sought from the innovation team. At this point, we'll ask you more details about your innovation, about your idea, to understand what stage it's currently at, and this will help us decide where to progress to next. And it might be that a market analysis is needed. At this point, we'll complete a market report to find out if there's a need for the idea, or if there's anything else on the market that hasn't been considered for use yet, and if so, can it be adopted and adapted to suit your needs. We can ask independent experts for their opinion to provide a peer review. So these are usually colleagues from different organisations who might carry out a similar role to the inventor or idea. And as mentioned earlier, the innovation team will ensure that any IP is suitably protected. So the idea might need proof of concept or evaluation. And to do this, we might engage with some of our partners in academia, other healthcare organisations or industry to develop prototypes, or they can support technical documents for the idea. And some ideas might require funding, so we encourage you to think about useful funding sources, but we'll also help support you with your funding applications as well as searching for possible funding opportunities. So ideas will be assessed for their commercial impact, and if appropriate, a business case will be developed and shared with potential commercial partners. And if successful, agreements are set in place to ensure the trust receives royalties and revenue will flow back into the organisation. And then finally, we'll look at ways for spread and adoption of the innovation. And just to mention as well, there is a difference between innovation and quality improvement. So quality improvement involves looking at how something's done, steps, roles, materials used, and making it more effective and efficient. And all innovation is quality improvement, but not all quality improvement is innovation. And if you're not sure, it's just best to contact the innovation team to discuss your ideas, and we can help direct you to the right team. And the quality improvement team has their own way of managing quality improvement projects, and you can register those. But this is a really good example of quality improvement that was innovation, and it also shows how a simple change can make a huge difference. So the dementia aid was developed by Heather Dixon, a physiotherapist in Berwick, who identified a problem. So dementia patients are a vulnerable group who are at increased risk of falling, and by placing red material on patient Zimmer frames allowed for easier identification of walking, resulting in patients no longer falling. And there's some evidence to back that up as well, and this is also included in the brochure that will follow the event. So we want you to know innovation, it doesn't just happen. It starts with good ideas from doctors, nurses, and any individual who works at the Trust. We encourage you to be innovative and creative, and let the team know if you have a bright idea, or even if you're not sure if your idea has potential, still get in touch with the team so we can help guide and support you. And we don't just encourage you to get in touch if you think you have an idea. We also want to know if you've identified a problem or maybe even found a solution to a problem, and we can help support you with that. Thank you. So next up, we have the research team providing an overview as to the research services offered.
Hello, my name's Sarah Pick. I'm one of the research nurses here at Northumbria, and today I'm going to just talk to you and give you a brief overview of research. So first of all, what is research? Well, it can be defined as the attempt to derive generalizable or transferable new knowledge to answer or refine relevant questions with scientifically sound methods, and that's from the HRA, the Health Research Authority, 2017. And why do we do research? Well, research is an essential part of making sure that we give our patients the best care possible. When we do research, it will hopefully help to improve the quality of life for people who are living with disease. It will help to treat the disease, improve survival rates, and also help to diagnose disease and health problems. There are lots of different types of research. For example, some studies might look at new treatments or require samples, others might involve interviews or surveys. A study might take place in a hospital or a GP surgery, a hospice, but some studies can also be done at home, online or via the telephone. Some research studies require just a one-off involvement, while others might have several years' worth of follow-ups. So what might a study involve? You can see here from this diagram there's lots of different tests and activities that a study might involve. So just quickly going through it, you can see physical tests, questionnaires, online activities, scans, genetic tests, and lifestyle changes and drug trials. And when we're thinking about drugs trials, you may have heard phases of drugs trials mentioned, particularly given the current climate of the COVID drugs that are being looked at. And this slide here just explains the different phases. So you've got phase 1, which is just checking for the safety of a drug, and that will just involve a small amount of healthy volunteers. Phase 2 is where we're looking to see how effective the drug is, and the sample size is a bit bigger. Phase 3, the sample size is much bigger than initially, and we're just looking to confirm the findings in a larger patient population. And phase 4, that's where we test the long-term safety in the patient population. And here at Northumbria, we cover lots of different areas of research, covering lots of different disease areas, and you can see on the list here some of the areas that we do cover. Obviously, there may be some other areas that aren't on this list that we have covered previously or will do in the future. But if anybody does have any questions or anything they'd like to know, then please don't hesitate in getting in touch with our department.
Hello, my name is Gemma Fennick and I'm the Deputy Manager for the R&D Governance team at Northumbria Hospital. As my colleagues Kath and Sarah have explained to you what research is and the research we support within our organisation, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to explain to you what my team does and how we support you in identifying and setting up research projects within the organisation. From our expression of interest stage, you will have the opportunity to see projects that are looking for new sites. These are shared with all our interested clinicians, consultants, researchers, nurses within our organisation. This gives you the opportunity to have a little look at some projects that are out there and decide whether or not you're interested in taking part and getting involved. We can support you in considering and planning the resources you would need to take part in this project, but also in selling yourself. So the idea of when you express an interest in a project is you need to sell your skills and experience of your department and how you would be the site that's best fit for that. When and hopefully when you are selected for the project, we don't just leave your support there. We will continue to support you in preparing all of the local, regulatory and organisational paperwork that's needed to be able to set up the project at our site. We will also ensure that we have all necessary legal, governance and capacity approvals in place for you. So we don't leave you alone, we support you all the way through this process. However, we don't just support you with other people's research. If you have some ideas of your own, then we support you in that too. So we very much have an open door policy and we say, come and tell us. If you have any ideas of doing your own research project or you have your own research questions, then we would like you to come and speak with us. When you do, we will offer you support in funding and resources, supporting you with all the necessary paperwork that you need to do to be able to take part or to action your own project. My main point and my main message from this presentation is to say to you, come and speak to us. If you want to take part in someone else's research, if you have your own ideas and you'd like to know how to get started in research, then we're here to help. Drop us an email, give us a call, and we'll arrange a time to have a chat with you. Thank you very much. We're here to help. Please just give us a shout if there's anything you need. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandra and I'm a nurse researcher here at Northumbria Trust, and I'm going to just have a little chat with you about doing research for nurses and HPs. So how do we use our own voice and how does research really come into that? Well, think about it. Everything we do is evidence-based, and evidence really does drive change and underpins all our practice. But where does it come from? Well, there's three main areas. One is research, and the other is audit, and we also do service evaluations. And you could ask yourself, do nurses and HPs need to do that? Well, absolutely yes, is my response. So what's the difference between a service, audit and research? Well, you can ask yourself this question. What is the DNA rate of an outpatient department? Okay, so you just want to know that answer. Where would you get your data from? You get it from the trust systems. Do you need permission to do it? Well, yeah, I'd register that with the trust and your manager. So that's a survey. You could ask yourself another question. Is our DNA rate acceptable? So you'll have a standard with which to measure that. Then that becomes an audit. You're measuring against a standard. Where do you get your information from? The trust system. Do you need to register that? Yeah, we have an audit department, so always register your audits within that department and make sure your manager knows. Then you could ask yourself another question. Why do patients DNA? Now that is a whole new question, and it's a brand new question and it's original. That then becomes research. And where do you get your data from? Well, you have to create your own research plan, and that could include doing things like qualitative interviews and stuff like that. Where do you need to get your permissions? Well, you need ethics, research and development, and Caldecott. It's really important to get those permissions, especially when you're working with patients. So that's the difference between survey, audit, and research. Why would we really need to do it? Should we bother ourselves? Well, my answer is absolutely. It can lead to service improvement, and that is so important. It also optimises the patient experience, and we all want that. And also, we can do it for ourselves. You know, we as nurses have to revalidate, as many of our colleagues do, and it could certainly contribute to that. It can change department structure. It's really satisfying to actually do a project yourself. And I tell you something, it really looks good on your CV, and it will definitely open up other doors. There are some barriers, I guess, if we make them, but you know what? All barriers can be overcome. We can get support. We may need funding, possibly, or we may not. We just really incorporate this project into our own work, and it becomes less burdensome in that way. Gathering the data, analysing it, there's always people out there. So what would you do next? Get others involved. It's getting the support, and support from people who have done this before is really, really important. And there are lots of people out there who really want to help you. So get your colleagues on board. It's so much easier to share the work, and you get more ideas, and also takes less time. And I'll tell you something, when you're organising and planning a project, always make sure you've got lots of time to do it. Double the time. 6 months you think? No, it'll take 12. So make sure you've got plenty of time to do it. Also, don't forget about your audit and research and development departments. There's loads of really helpful people in there who just want to help. So think about a question. Think about where you work. Can you think of anything you do every day which you think could be done better? Can you think of something you do every day which really works well, but how do you prove it? So they could be two really good starts to get your research question there. And remember this, it doesn't have to be complicated. Some of the simplest questions of mine have gone to publication, and honestly, they weren't complicated. But I would say this to you, be very careful about what you do choose. Do your groundwork. Use the libraries. We've got fantastic librarians here in Northumbria Trust. They are brilliant. They're always so helpful. So use that resource. They're out there to help, and make sure you're getting really good, high quality research. And I will definitely say this to you: communicate your results. Don't keep them to yourself. Your results are really important. Your voice is really important, and what you do needs to be out there. So don't keep it to yourself. Use your voice. Where would you do that? Well, we all have department meetings. You can present your findings there. What about your regional meetings? Plenty of opportunities. Conferences, all of us have conferences within our specialities, and it's really great fun presenting a poster. A little bit daunting doing an oral presentation, but it's really good fun at the end of it. And I would also say publish. Publishing is really, really important. So go on, get out there. You can do it. It's exciting, it's achievable, can lead to improvement of services, and it can support your role and lead you into a different direction. You can do it.
So thank you to the research team there for presenting, and I think we'll get straight into the case studies now, supported by the team. First up, we have Professor Mike Reid, a trauma and orthopaedic surgeon.
Okay, good afternoon. So I'm Mike Reid. I'm Clinical Director for Orthopaedics, but my academic background and my base now is University of York. So can I have the next slide, please? So breaking your hip in your 80s is a really risky thing to do, and it carries a high risk of mortality, but also a high risk of infection. And I'm going to tell you just a little story about one of our research projects, and I want you to interpret this in the basis that there's been many other projects that have been happening alongside it that have helped us grow into a research active department. So it really feeds into the comments that Laurel has made, and also that Peter made about this being a journey, but also based around innovation. So next slide, please. Now, this is Andy Sprowson, who was one of our trainees back in about 2005. And in the coffee room in Wansbeck, we had the innovation discussion. And he said, well, why don't we use this very high dose antibiotic cement in patients with a hip fracture rather than just the standard antibiotic cement? Because when they do get infections, the risk of them dying is about 50%. So very significant risk. So next slide, please. So this is a trial that we dreamt up between these two different types of antibiotic cement that we fixed the hip fractures with. This was done on a shoestring, this whole thing. It did in the latter years count as portfolio research, but was done extremely cheaply, not charging the company any money to do this. So next slide, please. So over a period of years, we managed to recruit over 800 patients into this study, and it was really a pilot study because of its size, because infection is a fairly rare event. But in fact, it was such a significant difference. It did actually come into significance. So so we could have hung up our hat there, but in fact, that probably isn't good enough level of evidence to change NICE guidance. So next slide, please. This study did go on to get published, and really laid the ground then for us to get involved in some bigger research. Next slide, please. So one of the key issues of doing these larger studies is you really need the support of trials units. And we've worked with a couple of trials units who have really helped us bolster our involvement in research. And the big ones are the Oxford Trials Unit, who do lots of musculoskeletal research, and then the York Trials Unit, where I'm based, and they're the British Orthopaedic Trials Unit. And that's really supported by the clinical team in Northumbria in orthopaedics, which is now probably the third or fourth biggest in the UK. Next slide, please. So on the basis of that, we worked with, on this occasion, with Oxford Trials Unit to get a very robust study designed to test this innovation of the high dose antibiotic cement. Next slide, please. And this is the design of the study. It's got close to 5,000 patients in it. I think it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, surgical trial that there's been, funded by industry, sponsored by Northumbria, has about 25 UK centres involved. We were actually ahead of recruitment up until COVID. We were about 3,500 patients in and ahead of time, but we probably will now finish on time because we're still managing to get the recruits. Next slide, please. So I really just need you to interpret that in the context that there's been many other similar things going on, gradually building over a long period of time. You really need a strategy. And the R&D team have been key to this. They were extremely supportive in the early years when we were doing these studies really on a shoestring with large portfolio recruits, but not much money coming in. And that's changed now. I mean, Northumbria is probably the most stringent trust that I work with around the country in terms of what money the trust can bring in. So we work heavily with trainee leads. When I get a grant, I always cost in a trainee salary for 3 years because they can front it, and also it brings on chief investigators of the future. We've had fantastic colleague support in our department, now led by David Townsend, who leads our research stream. We also have a number of paid sessions for clinicians, which I think is really important. I don't think you can expect people to do this for free, and we do have a number of studies now paying various components of people's salaries. We work hard on motivating the trainees, not just because they lead the studies, but also now because they can get recognition for their ARCPs and for ultimately their CCT, but also just adopting this NIHR Associate PI status for the trainees. Next slide, please. So I think that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And next up, we have Sarah Moore, who's a senior lecturer and physiotherapist.
Hi, can I have my first slide, please? So there are around 1.2 million UK stroke survivors, and that equates to about 1 stroke every 3.5 minutes. Now, physical inactivity and sedentary behaviour are big problems following stroke. And during my PhD, I established that structured exercise could reduce brain atrophy and increase brain blood flow and improve metabolic control, function and quality of life in the short term. But unfortunately, in the long term, we don't know the best methods of supporting stroke survivors to be physically active and reduce their sedentary behaviour. Next slide, please. So if we look at the current pathway of stroke and physical activity, we can see it's quite front-ended. So in the first few months, stroke survivors tend to get a lot of functional rehab that's really focused on function rather than physical activity. And then when they discharge from inpatient services, if they're lucky, then they might get referred to a community exercise programme. But this tends to be time limited and not many people are able to access it. So what we need is a future pathway of stroke physical activity support for more stroke survivors. Next slide, please. So this leads me to my ambition. So just over 4 years ago now, I worked with Northumbria Healthcare to put together a funding application to the NIHR Integrated Clinical Academic Scheme. So this is a really brilliant scheme where I was working previously as a physio, and this enables you to carry on working clinically. So I carried on working clinically at one spec within the stroke rehab service, and it also gives you the time and space to do a research programme. So this is a stage post-PhD, and it was a 4-year lectureship. So my research programme wanted to look at providing healthcare professionals with the tools to effectively support people with stroke to increase their long-term physical activity and reduce sedentary behaviour. So as I say, my clinical work was at Northumbria Healthcare, and then my research programme was supported by the Stroke Research Group with Helen Rogers and Chris Price at Newcastle University. Okay, next slide, please. So it's been a busy few years. So over this time, we've started kind of developing the programme by doing a systematic review, looking at what information there already is on physical activity following stroke and interventions to support it. I also did a qualitative study with stroke survivors, informal carers and community stroke services, looking at what the barriers and enablers to physical activity are following stroke. And then we use this information to take an intervention mapping approach, which is where you look at different behaviour change techniques in theory and map an intervention. So then we did more workshops, took the mapped intervention and co-designed it further with patients and relatives. We took the intervention to an aphasia research group because from experience, a lot of the research trials that had been done previously in stroke hadn't included people with communication problems. So we thought this was really important to enable as many people with stroke to access this intervention. And then we took it back to more acceptability usability groups. And we sent out a questionnaire to healthcare professionals, really to kind of tweak the intervention. And then if I have the next slide there, please. And then we got to the next stage where I was working closely with Northumbria Healthcare as the sponsor of this study and with the research and development department. And this was a feasibility, acceptability and fidelity study. So what the intervention was a supported self-management programme for supporting people with stroke. But it had two strands. So it was targeting behaviour of the healthcare professionals. So we targeted this through face-to-face training and feedback on their delivery of the intervention. And at the same time, we were targeting the stroke survivors' physical activity and sedentary behaviour. So we tested this in 3 different stroke services in the Northeast. And then if I have the next slide, please, Mark. And then from the results, we found that the stroke survivors really liked the intervention. They found it really beneficial, worthwhile, and they would recommend it to other stroke survivors. What we found from the healthcare professional point of view was it needed streamlining, so they needed it to be slicker so it could kind of fit within their current stroke services. So it's a more structured process for the service. So working really closely with the Academic Health Science Network, over the past kind of 8 months, I've been working on trying to scale this intervention and looking at how we can bring this intervention to more stroke survivors. So using the feedback from the feasibility study and iteratively developing the intervention. So it's really targeted. And I've had, as I say, brilliant support from the Academics Science Network, and they've been helping me to look at all different aspects of scaling up the project, which is called Physical Activity Routines After Stroke, PARAS. I'm putting the training online for the healthcare professionals, putting all the resources online, and we've got to the point now where we're almost ready to launch this website, and we're going to be looking for stroke services across the UK to try and trial this training website within kind of a real world evaluation. So just last slide there. Oh, sorry. So that's just my details at the top of the email there. So you can just see that you can contact me now. So I've actually moved to Northumbria University now, but I've still got an honorary contract with the trust. But if your stroke service is interested in taking part in kind of the rollout of PARAS, then just get in touch. And just finally, just the final slide, just to acknowledge the patients and carers, Northumbria Healthcare Trust, the Academic Health Science Network, and all the people that have helped me along this journey, kind of into clinical academia.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. And next up we have Yanis, who is a Professor of Rehabilitation Sciences at Northumbria University.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. So this is, can I go to the next slide, please? So this is Ioannis Vogiadis. I'm a Professor of Rehabilitation Sciences at Northumbria University, and I'm going to present to you the VitaBreath study that investigated the influence of a portable, non-invasive ventilation device on exercise capacity in patients with COPD. Next slide, please. So this was a collaborative project between the Northumbria NHS Trust and Northumbria University. Professor Stephen Berg from North Tyneside General Hospital is an expert on the application of non-invasive ventilation in patients with chronic lung disease, and I'm an expert in clinical exercise physiology with experience in working with patients with COPD. Next slide, please. So when a new portable device became available in the market, Stephen and I applied to Philips Respironics for an investigator-initiated research grant to test the efficacy of the apparatus in patients with COPD during laboratory-based exercise and also during activities of daily living. The Vitabus device provides intermittent bi-level positive airway pressure to reduce the work of breathing and the magnitude of dynamic hyperinflation and associate breathlessness following physical exertion. A novel aspect about this device is that it is portable and it is not used during exercise as other non-invasive ventilation devices, but it is applied in recovery from exercise to speed up recovery of breathlessness, something that may have a tangible impact for patients in the setting of pulmonary rehabilitation. Next slide, please. So the NIHR Clinical Research Network Northeast and North Cumbria adopted the study in their research portfolio, and the North Tyneside General Hospital provided clinical research staff time and laboratory infrastructure to conduct the study. Northumbria University provided state-of-the-art technology to assess respiratory function during exercise, including an ergometric gas exchange analysis system and a cycloergometer, as you can see in this slide. Next slide, please. Subsequently, for this study, we also employed optoelectronic plethysmography to assess thoracoabdominal volume kinematics so as to better appreciate the effect that non-invasive ventilation had on thoracoabdominal respiratory muscle function. This is the only optoelectronic plethysmography system available in the UK. That was a strategic investment by Northumbria University to promote collaboration between the university and respiratory chest physicians in the region. With this system, we can see the behavior of 3 thoracoabdominal compartments on a breath-by-breath basis, and the system can be used for clinical trials to test the effectiveness of different drug interventions. Next slide, please. So in 30 patients with COPD, we investigated whether the portable non-invasive ventilation device improved exercise tolerance and recovery of breathlessness during laboratory-based exercise, and also examined whether application and perceived benefit from using the device for 3 months at home favored the use of this device during daily life physical activities in terms of improving anxiety around breathlessness. Next slide, please. This project has so far been very successful, and we have published 2 manuscripts, and we have 1 more manuscript in preparation for submission this month. Next slide, please. There have been several benefits as a result of this collaboration between the Trust and the new university in terms of providing proof of concept that intermittent use of non-invasive ventilation can reduce dynamic lung hyperinflation and breathlessness during exercise, thereby potentially enhancing exercise tolerance in the setting of pulmonary rehabilitation. In addition, we showed faster recovery of breathlessness when patients use the device in their daily physical activities. There were also benefits of scientific outputs, the manuscripts in the peer-reviewed medical and physiology journals, and several abstracts that have been presented at the European and British Thoracic Society annual conferences. There have been benefits in terms of knowledge transfer, as several students reading for the Masters in Clinical Exercise Physiology from Northumbria University undertook dissertations in a clinical setting and acquired clinical expertise. Next slide, please. In fact, 2 of the Northumbria MSc students subsequently succeeded in gaining NHS employment as respiratory physiologists. The collaboration with Professor Stephen Berg is ongoing, and we have collectively submitted 4 grant applications to NIHR so far. And we are currently working on an NHS service improvement project targeting funding for pulmonary rehabilitation under the auspices of the NHS England and NHS Improvement long-term plan. And we are discussing with Philips Respironics future studies on the new generation of auto-adjusted ventilators in order to test the benefits of these devices in pulmonary patients using the optoelectronic plethysmography technology. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. And next up we have Jeanette Milne, who's a Chief Matron in the community from Northumbria Healthcare.
Thanks, Laurel. Next slide, please. I just wanted to share, I suppose, that research is very much a journey. This is the study portfolio that I've been involved in, and you can see it dates back to 1998 when I was employed in Newcastle as a tissue viability nurse and was involved in the first study, which was a CTIMP study looking at platelet-derived growth factors in the treatment of category 3 and 4 pressure ulcers. But essentially, there are all different types of research, and we have a really healthy portfolio here of medical device-related studies, which are commercial studies. But you can see we've also been involved in academic studies, and I've been lucky enough throughout my career to be principal investigator and chief investigator on these studies, and very much with a co-conspirator. So I can't reinforce enough that it is very important to get the research and development department, wherever you're working, involved in the studies that you're working on. And Louise Jones has definitely been key to the success of Northumbria from a community perspective. But it's enabled us to embed research at all levels throughout tissue viability, and all levels of staff within the team here are involved in research on a daily basis. And this very much has led to my exposure, both regionally, nationally and internationally, and led to the ability to present at various congresses, but also embed this research in clinical practice for our patients here at Northumbria to get those better outcomes that David talked about at the beginning. Next slide, please. I've been lucky enough as a result of that to secure a PhD fee waiver from Huddersfield University. And as Peter said, it's very much about the questions that aren't answered. For those of you that aren't involved in wounds, £5.3 billion per year is spent on wound care in the UK. And this was very much about getting documentation of wounds at the point of care. And also the fact that System 1 isn't always the best tool, and the templates within it aren't always easy to give you what you want and to prompt caregiver activity. The biggest prognostic indicator in relation to wound care is 40% reduction at 4 weeks. And my idea was very much just being able to get that regression analysis and graph type visual out to clinical staff so they could see whether the wound was improving, deteriorating or static, and also trigger some thought processes around that. So we linked up with a commercial organisation to develop a wound app, and oh boy, did I not know what we were getting ourselves into in the beginning. Obviously, MHRA have stated that all apps that are used in healthcare have to be CE marked, and also that in itself is not an easy process. So again, one of the other speakers said today, double and treble the time that you're going to give yourself for this research. But we did get CE marking, and we've gone on to write a proposal, and it's really a feasibility study looking at patient acceptability. If anybody's interested in more details in relation to the study or wants to be that one district nurse team that tries this app out, we were at the point of submitting our IRAS forms. However, COVID put a halt on that. And we are now working in the background on version 2 of the app and getting a CE mark, and hope to start recruiting patients next year. Next slide, please. I think in terms of my journey, it's very much about knowing your field of practice and having a professional curiosity, and just asking questions and being open to opportunities. Being really honest about the methodology that you're going to use and setting your question first. So while you're learning that new language and the rules and regulations of research, you have somebody's hand to hold. And Louise has very much been my co-conspirator in that. Next slide, please. I think the keys to success: every speaker here today has talked about establishing a network, having that critical friend, fellow researchers, the academic health science network, building collaborations with universities. I think if you're going to start out on a journey towards research, it's very much about being realistic, perhaps starting small as I did, with a very much thought through and ethically approved study that I could participate in from a research, data collection and recruitment of patients perspective. But it's really important that your research has a defined question and that your methodology seeks to answer this question. It's always great when you're a researcher to have that streak of competitiveness in you, and Louise really challenges me to try and make sure that we recruit to time and target and meet the needs of our partners when we do research. And I think it's really important to have a strategy to share and inspire others. And as our other colleague alluded to today, it may be scary being on that podium presenting your work. However, it's very, very rewarding afterwards when people comment, ask questions and want you then to speak again. And I think the keys for me in terms of research is resilience and determination. And you have all been amazingly resilient. But I think the NHS has as a whole. And I think we can do this, and anybody can be a researcher, an innovator in practice. Next slide, please. I think for me, research is what I do when I don't know what I'm doing, very much like this quote says. I'll hand it over back to Laurel. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. And I think now that brings us to the closing remarks. But I'd just like to say a massive thank you to all the presenters today and for all of you for joining the event. And a huge thank you to the Academic Health Science Network who support the innovation team, with a thank you to Kirsty, Sarah and Mark for helping organise the event. Next slide, please. So we hope we've inspired you to be creative and think about research and innovation. What would we like from you? We'd like to know if you've identified a problem, a solution or an idea. We are here to help support you and support you through the innovation pathway. We'd also like to run some unmet needs workshops. So this will involve working with you and your clinical teams to see if you've identified any problems and look for solutions to those problems. And please just get in touch with me if you have any questions. We have a wide range of skills and expertise in the research team to help support you. And you can contact the team using the email address shown, and you can follow us on Twitter, and you can also contact us with the phone number on the screen as well. But there will be an email that will follow the event with our contact details and also a link to the brochure that includes the presentations today and more information as well. Thank you very much for joining today. And like I said, we'll send you all an email and just get in touch with us if you want to discuss research, innovation, please let me know. And if you'd like to run unmet needs workshops, please get in touch with me. Thank you all.